for the project in the hands of the federal government. The project at this time is estimated to be a $285 million project. The federal government will give the state of New York credit for the facilities that are being provided, as well as for the services that the state will provide during the life of the project, so that the state is meeting its 10% share with little or no cash contribution at this time.
Nuclear fuel services had its beginning in 1961 when New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller and his GOP-controlled Senate okayed the private nuclear service. In 1963, the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission issued a permit for the construction of NFS. Thus was created the only licensed commercial nuclear fuel reprocessing and storage operation in the nation. It is located on 3,300 acres of land at the foot of the Allegheny Mountains in the quiet, unincorporated village of West Valley, some 35 miles southeast of Buffalo. The nation's reactors are fueled with uranium, mined from the earth. Because there is a limited supply of uranium, it was hoped that it could be recycled. For 6 years at West Valley, from 1966 to 1972, the spent fuel from reactors was reprocessed, separating the uranium and plutonium from the waste products. But the operation was neither a technological nor an economic success. NFS closed its operation in 1972, leaving at its site tons of solid and liquid radioactive waste. After 4 years of public hearings and spirited debates, Congress finally gave approval for the cleanup of 600,000 gallons of high-level liquid waste at West Valley and sent the bill to President Carter for his signature.
It is identical chemically to the chemical makeup of the solidified waste as it will be made. You see, the waste from the liquid waste from the tank will be mixed with gaseous ingredients, sand and limestone, in a melting furnace and poured as a liquid glass into steel canisters, thick-walled steel canisters about the size of a domestic water heater. And the glass will pour in and will solidify, just as this is solidified, and be chemically identical, and then it will be welded shut for deep geologic burial.
Well, what I'd like to know in addition is there or will there be any liquid component after the solidification has been completed?
No, this is a glass. It is a piece identical to rock. It is a piece of solid glass. It will be solid within a couple of hours after it's poured, and it will remain solid through all time.
Is there any danger of it dissolving or decomposing and regaining its liquid state?
No, there is not. Of course, it's possible to leach glass with certain chemicals, but we don't put the glass in the ground where those chemicals are, and we put engineered barriers around it, like a thin sheet of titanium metal, to protect it for at least 1,000 years, so it could not even be breached if it did encounter such materials.
The danger of it leaching out and percolating through the ground then is
virtually non-existent.
Yes.
This technology is in existence. It's being used routinely every day in France and in other countries. The French are making a canister of waste every day for their nuclear fuel program.
Just to recapitulate briefly, this bill that I will sign now will provide a joint federal-state partnership which will be innovative in nature, set a standard for the rest of the country in the disposal of nuclear waste material.
Today, the people of New York and the United States can be assured that any threat to their health and safety which they have associated with West Valley will be eliminated. Today, the people of New York and the United States can be assured that the federal and state governments are in full partnership to begin the necessary task of solving the problem of nuclear waste.
What's on the site right now? You have two burial grounds right next to each other. There's a state licensed burial ground which consists of trenches which operated to 1973. You have an NRC licensed burial ground which has holes dug deep, which contains most of the materials from the plant. You have a reprocessing building on the site, highly contaminated reprocessing building, and you have these underground You can't really see them from the air, but underground storage tanks. There are two large tanks. One contains 600,000 gallons of radioactive materials, very hot. And you have a smaller stainless steel waste tank and its alternate, which contains radioactive materials in liquid form. There are 5 lagoons. They've been used in the past. The radioactive material, when the plant operated, the radioactive materials were released to Cattaraugus Creek watershed, and they first passed through these lagoons, which are really settling ponds. So those contain radioactive materials as well in the mud. The purpose of reprocessing is to take these fuel rods and recycle the material, which in general, of course, environmental groups like ours are in favor of recycling materials. You take out the uranium, you'd separate the uranium from the plutonium, and then you'd have this waste material that you would store and eventually dispose of somehow. So they would take these fuel assemblies and dissolve them in acid, and then it would be like a chemical facility, a radioactive chemical facility. They'd separate out all the materials, and then they'd take the uranium away. The plutonium, much of the plutonium came from Hanford, Washington, and that would be sent back. 60% of it would be weapons-grade plutonium, and that would be used for weapons. Some of the other plutonium was given to some of the fuel manufacturers and also shipped to West Germany. The uranium itself has never been recycled and sits in Ohio now. And the waste, of course, sit in the tank at West Valley. Most of the waste sitting in a very large tank, about 600,000 gallons of waste sit in a tank at West Valley.
Can you describe this tank and its contents?
Well, the tank is sort of like a large pancake. It's about 75 feet in diameter, 25 feet high. It sits in a vault. It sits within a pan, which sits within a concrete vault.
Is this steel?
It's a carbon steel tank, so it's corroding, like any steel drum would be corroding. The material inside the tank is separated into 2 phases. There's a liquid, and then there's a sludge underneath the liquid. And that sludge is intermixed with the lattice work at the bottom of the tank.
This is a schematic of a solidification project that is going on in the western part of the country. And it shows that the process of taking liquid, the chemical liquid, through a calcination process and then a solidification process is a relatively simple process. What complicates it for nuclear radioactive materials is that the boiling off and the reduction in volume of the materials requires some very elaborate what they call off-gas systems. You simply can't boil this stuff and let the steam go into the environment. So there's a lot of steps involved in protecting the escape of any of the materials. But what you wind up with is you reduce a liquid to a form of glass. This is the non-radioactive version of that glass. And once you have it in the gaseous form, it's far more manageable, far easier to use. These processes exist now. They're being done in laboratory settings, and the wastes at West Valley are not appreciably different from wastes now being solidified. And in fact, as much waste as there is at West Valley has already been solidified elsewhere in the country.
Well, the form of the liquid waste that's currently in the tanks at West Valley is a bit different than what would exist if you intended to put it into glass to begin with. Therefore, there is somewhat of an experimental program required to solidify the waste at West Valley. However, there's no one that I've talked to that has been involved in any of the solidification processes that has the least bit of doubt that they can come up with a process that's just as good as has been developed for other waste. So it's just a matter of somebody making up their mind to get down to and doing it.
In other words, we don't have the technology as of today.
Well, how do you define technology? One could say you don't have the technology because you never really tried to do it. But I can guarantee you there are techniques which you can solidify that waste at West Valley that may be perfectly adequate. It may not be as good as the glass, but again, it may be perfectly adequate. If you solidified it in cement and put it into a controlled and engineered storage area, that may be perfectly adequate. That's one possibility.
I feel that we do have the technology. It will have to be probably this calcification glass for the high-level waste.
And how would they do that?
Well, it would take a lot of construction for a new building, and then it will have to be pumped into special tanks where the glass and the liquids are mixed and heated, and they will solidify under a lot of heat.
When you do solidify the liquid, what will happen to the sludge at the bottom of the tank?
One of the first steps in the project, specifically identified in the agreement, is the development of a technology or a technique for removing the sludge from the tanks and making it part of the batch to be solidified. So getting the sludge out of the tanks is part of the project.
Do we know the physical or chemical makeup of this sludge?
To a certain extent we do, and to a certain extent the first part of the project will be involved in identifying with more specificity the exact makeup of the sludge.
It seems that we're going to be learning as we go along with this project.
Sure. This is, West Valley is a unique facility and a unique problem. There have not been West Valleys before upon which we can rely in knowing what this project will look like.
Now that one tank that everybody seems to be so concerned about probably has a lifespan of supposedly another 20 years, and the high-level liquid waste is supposed to last for a couple of 100,000 years. And they feel that there is a great danger there if the solidification isn't done within the next 10 years.
Well, I feel that the life of those tanks will last a lot longer than what they say. Just before leaving the plant, I was one of the ones that pulled up the coupons with the sample. The coupons are made of metal that is the same metal as the tanks are made of. And they are down inside of the tank, right in the solution, on all sides of it. And they are pulled up every year, or every few years it is, I'm not sure exactly, and are checked for corrosion of these, of the coupons.
What's a coupon?
A coupon is it's a chunk of metal, and there's numbers on it, and they know exactly what it weighs, and you can see it. I mean, you know, and when they bring it up and they take it to the lab, and it's weighed and cleaned off, and to see if there is any corrosion, to see if there's any eating away of the metal itself.
What was the condition of the coupons when you brought them up from the tank?
Very clean and no corrosion, and they look like they were brand new, like they'd never been down in a tank.
What is the life expectancy of one of these tanks?
Okay, the tanks were originally designed to last for 40 years. Somewhere in the last 2 years they gained 10 years from the Department of Energy, and now they're designed to last for 50 years. The waste in the tanks, on the other hand, they will be dangerous anywhere from 300 to 200,000, 300 years to 200,000 years, depending on who you talk to. Okay, depending on whether you talk to the nuclear industry or use their latest numbers or their old numbers. But
we have 600,000 gallons of highly active liquid waste. And in the bottom of this one tank is an unknown amount of sludge. Right. Do we know what is contained in this sludge?
No. As a matter of fact, it's surprising that so little is known about it. They don't really know what the physical or the chemical characteristics of that sludge are. They don't even know yet how to take a stratigraphic sample.
After this liquid waste is glassified or solidified, where will it be buried?
In a federal repository. If the question is where will that federal repository be, the answer would have to be at this point, we do not know, because the federal government has not established those federal repositories.
In other words, it could be buried at West Valley until we have one? No?
No. West Valley is not among the sites or the kind of geography and geology that the federal government is examining for ultimate disposal. The more likely candidates are in the West, in New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, and the state of Washington.
It's been stated that the facility would not be used for any other purpose during this solidification program. How many years are we talking about?
The estimate is through the year 1997.
What will happen after the program is complete? Will spent fuel rods be sent to West Valley pending the selection of a federal repository?
There is no use of this facility in the agreement, and there is none contemplated following the agreement. The decision makers of 1997 will have to determine what to do with the facility after it has been, the waste has been solidified, it has been decommissioned and decontaminated, and turned back over to the state.
Is there any chance this facility could be used for reprocessing spent fuel?
No, I don't. I think this country has put itself out of the reprocessing business for a long time, and once this facility is converted for solidification, it will not be equipped to be used for reprocessing. So I don't think we'll ever see reprocessing again in this country or at West Valley in particular.
Certainly, when in talking to people, we've said we have an interest. We think the low-level site should be operated. We feel that Chem Nuclear Systems is the most qualified low-level waste site operator in the country. Our Barnwell site has always operated at the peak of performance. It's been used as an example for local and foreign dignitaries to show how a low-level site should be run. We feel we're the most capable people to do it. There's a desperate need for a low-level site in the Northeast, and because the waste already exists at West Valley, it would make a great deal of sense to continue the operation there. So you have someone there who's there on a day-to-day basis, who's interested in staying there for another 100, 200 years, and is going to fit into the community and do the type job there that should be done.
How would you like to see the facility here at West Valley used in the near future?
I would like to see it used as reprocessing. And then for the waste of low-level waste.
And you feel it'd be no danger to the community?
No, there would be no danger to the community.
Get on! Come on! West Valley residents are not only split over the plant's past and future, but the very presence of the facility.
Amy. Come on, Amy.
The only fears I have is what I really don't know. People in Love Canal were lied to and people tried to cover up their problems, problems which you could see in the ground just like if you're looking at grass. And this is something here that you can't see, you can't smell it, and everybody still says it's safe as far as the government side, and yet I read articles from other people that say it isn't safe. So if it can be covered up, this is the thing to cover up, because you can't see it, smell it, or hear it, or anything.
Have you had any thoughts of moving out?
I have and I haven't, probably no more or no less than anybody else around here. I know some people around here don't want to stay here because of it. I think if they could do something over here as far as containing what they got and not bringing anything else in, I think people would stay around here. But I think they have to fix what they got right now.
I'm not against it. Never was against it. They've got a lot of criticism. NFS has been criticized, but I feel NFS have been good neighbors. They've supported our community. They've stayed out of politics. I think they've done a good job over here.
What if they came back with spent fuel rods as a permanent repository here? How would you feel about that? Would you like to see it in operation as far as...
Just how permanent can it be? They've got to find a way of getting rid of their high-level waste. That's sure.
How do you feel about that? Do you figure we have the technology to do that? Do you think it's safe?
I'm not educated enough to say that, to give you an honest answer.
Do you have any fear at all?
No.
No diff to me. I ain't gonna be around here too much longer. No, I don't think it hurts enough on fire. Yeah, everything is checked out so much. We got so much other pollution that they don't check on at all. But this here is, they check this over pretty good. I got a guy that works for me, he works over there, and they tell how they check everything out, and it's all checked out good.
Is there fear here in your neighborhood? Your neighbors?
Yes, but it's very quiet. It's person to person, and people don't like to come out at meetings and say too much, and they don't say too much, say to a television camera or anything. They're a little bit leery of it.
Well, what is their greatest fear?
Well, they have the same fear that I do, that it's going to get bigger, I think. That would be the essence of what they're worried about now. Right now, I know of 3 people in the township who have tried to get rid of property that have had their phone hung up when they said where they lived. People would call the telephone number that was in the directory, and when they found out where they lived, they just hang up. They don't want to buy property in this area. The West Valley Tea Room down here had that happen to them, the lady who owns that, and they don't want to buy property here.
And the reputation, now that everybody knows it, you can't sell land around here for anything. Property value in town of Ashford is zilch. We have already tried to sell our farm, and when we talked to the realtor, they said, oh, you live in the town of Ashford, you live close to the nuclear plant. I says, yes, about 2 miles away. She says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. We cannot sell your place.
Have you ever had any trouble with your dairy cattle?
Yes, I would say we did, yes. Shortly after we came here, we had maybe 5 or 6 of our calves were born abnormal. Front legs were very crooked, crippled, bow shapes. A couple calves were blind. We had one calf with the heart developed totally, but outside the chest cavity. There was a hole in the middle of the chest, and the heart was outside.
Can any of this be tied in with the nuclear fuel reprocessing plant?
Myself, I can't say yes or no, but it does seem funny that as soon as the nuclear plant was supposedly closed down, that no more radioactivity was brought to the area, that it was like a light switch. It just stopped almost instantly. We haven't had a case since then.
I'm afraid of things I don't know, okay? And I don't think anybody really is aware, really knows what's going to happen, what can happen, because when you're dealing with something that has a life of thousands of years, how do you know what's going to happen in 500 years or 1,000 years, or what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's happening right now to things that grow in the garden? Nothing is supposed to be happening. I don't understand. There are leaks now. There aren't supposed to be leaks. Everybody says it's not leaking, it's safe. There are leaks happening right now. What if the leaks are going into underwater beds and are reaching the soil that's growing the food I'm feeding my children to make them healthy? It's fears that I can't do anything about it because I can't see it. It's not, if it's coming at me, it's coming, but I can't see it, I can't touch it. It's not in my tomatoes that I can taste the radioactivity. But I bake my own bread because I don't want my children to get things from chemicals in their food. How do I know what's coming from the radioactivity that I can't see?
Risky? Well, you're dealing with highly radioactive materials. It will be necessary to subject this to all of the stringency and controls that one would have on a high-level radioactive project. The risk has to be measured in terms of what is the risk of leaving the site in its current condition. I would describe that risk as high because the tanks are deteriorating. We don't know at what rate. We've not had any problem with the tanks, but we do know that sooner or later we will. And that has to be measured against the risk of solving the problem. But the project is not without some risk, clearly.
What would you say to residents around the country that may live in areas near spots where nuclear waste is buried? What do you tell these people?
I tell them to find out what the real facts are, to find out what the effects of radiation really are, look at both sides of it. They'll reach their own conclusion. I'm firmly convinced that if they take the time to do this, they'll find out that the hazards of living in that area is a heck of a lot less hazardous than living in many other areas of the country because of other other environmental problems, or even other standard problems that we don't even consider environmental problems. If I had my choice of living in West Valley or Lackawanna, maybe we shouldn't use that as a bad example, but I think it's a recognized one. There's no choice of where I would pick. I'd be sitting right next to I'll camp on Nuclear Fuel Services property and sit on top of the high-level waste tank if I was truly concerned about my health relative to Lackawanna. And I don't think Lackawanna is that bad. I'm just saying I think West Valley is that good.
What do you tell the worried residents around West Valley who fear that nuclear garbage may one day make its way back there?
Well, I like to worry about one thing at a time. The problem we had was we had a facility with a various accumulation of waste and no program for doing anything about it. We have worked very hard to get a program, a very good program, that's about to begin. At the end of that program, we will have disposed of the wastes that are there that worry us, the high-level liquid wastes. We will have provided for the decommissioning and decontamination of the bulk of the facilities. That's not a complete program, but it's damn close. The prospect that when this project is over, the site might be identified for some further use will have to be dealt with by those in the future. There's no action I can take in 1980 that can protect against that in 1997. All I can tell you is that we're protected against it until 1997, that we are going to take today's risk and reduce it substantially. We're going to take today's wastes and get them out of there. I think that's a pretty good deal.
In other words, at some point in time, there may be another dilemma there at West Valley.
West Valley is going to have to be dealt with as long as it exists.
Petitions signed by thousands of Western New Yorkers asking for this site to be cleaned up. We will fight with every means open to us, not just now during the decision process, but on and on and on. Through every step of the way, you will meet with nothing but resistance. We will intervene in every hearing. We will scrutinize every report. We will write letters till our fingers drop off. We will go to the courts. We will go to Congress, not just once, but over and over and over.
Edwin Newman, the NBC commentator and expert on language, says we in the news business grossly overuse and misuse the word controversial. It's become a crutch to describe people, issues, and things because we're either not smart enough or we're too lazy to come up with something more apt or accurate. He's absolutely right, of course, and with that truth in mind, let me say that our story this time is about a controversial subject, a real one. There simply is no other word accurate or apt enough to describe it. The subject is nuclear energy. I think even Newman would agree it fits. There's little about nuclear power that's not the subject of intense controversy. There appear to be two equally adamant, equally vocal, equally self-assured positions on every part of the nuclear puzzle, from its safeness to its economics. It all comes out in this report about a now abandoned nuclear processing plant in rural western New York. The narrator is Ron Arnold of WNED Buffalo.
West Valley, New York, a quiet village in the western part of the state, about 35 miles southeast of Buffalo. Population, 593. Agriculture has been its economic base, and silos dot the rolling countryside. Dairy cattle graze next to spring-fed brooks in this valley of gentle farmland in the foothills of the Allegheny Mountains. A slow drive through West Valley shows a character shared by 1,000 other villages in the country. A gas station, hardware store, 3 general stores, and a hotel make up Main Street. At the hotel bar are young and old men, rural men with complexions textured by the sun, flannel shirts and dungarees, the uniform of their trade. Off Main Street is a modern central high school, a couple of churches. Until 1963, West Valley was a depressed rural area, but that year brought the promise of jobs and progress, an economic boom in the form of the nuclear industry's dream. But all is not as it appears to be.
I'm afraid of things I don't know, because when you're dealing with something that has a life of thousands of years, how do you know what's going to happen in 500 years or 1,000 years, or what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's happening right now to things that grow in the garden? Nothing is supposed to be happening. I don't understand. There are leaks now. There aren't supposed to be leaks. Everybody says it's not leaking, it's safe. There are leaks happening right now. What if the leaks are going into underwater beds and are reaching the soil that's growing the food I'm feeding my children to make them healthy?
I'm scared to death of it. I wish it wasn't here.
Reporter Fran Lucca and West Valley farmer Floyd Zell.
You can't sell land around here for anything. Property value in town of Ashford is zilch. We have already tried to sell our farm, and when we talked to the realtor, they said, oh, you live in the town of Ashford, you live close to the nuclear plant. I says, yes, about 2 miles away. She says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. We cannot sell your place.
The only fears I have is what I really don't know. People in Love Canal were lied to and people tried to cover up their problems, problems which you could see in the ground.